This week on Heal Yourself Radio, we talk to Dr. Sandy Doman, the Miami yoga doc. She'll talk to us about how she uses yoga in her chiropractic practice to help her patients recover and heal themselves from musculoskeletal pain. If you like the show, make sure you leave us a comment on healyourselfradio.com in the comments section and head over to iTunes and rate this show. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we're about to get it started now.
You're listening to the Heal Yourself Radio Podcast. Unleash the Doctor Within with your hosts, Dr. Jonathan Chung and Dr. Gregory Jean-Pierre.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Heal Yourself Radio Show. Today we have a special guest. We have Dr. Sandra Doman, and she is a chiropractor and registered yoga teacher. She is actually known as the yoga doc here in sunny Miami, and she's also pretty well known through the sports world. She works with a lot of high-level athletes, including Dwayne Wade, and she is the chiropractor for his basketball camps. She is also the chiropractor for Gulfstream Park, where she takes care of the jockeys. Welcome to the show, Sandy.
Hi, Doc. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So give our guests a little bit of background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into chiropractic.
Oh, I love that question. I actually started out in sports marketing, and so throughout college and even after I graduated from Lehigh University, I worked at different organizations such as Nike Corporate out in Oregon, the Washington Redskins, and then my last job was actually at USA Today, the newspaper out in New York. I was probably 23 or 24 years old, working my entire life literally to get to Madison Avenue. And I remember looking down from my office on the 29th floor in Manhattan, and I said to myself, is this really it? So I remember looking around the corporate offices and being excited about the growth and the grooming and my boss and my boss's boss. And I remember thinking to myself, this is all great and wonderful, but everybody seems so unhealthy. I thought to myself, literally, just being in corporate America, even at a young age, I saw some unusual correlation that the farther you get in business and the busier and more business successful you were, the less time you had for health and wellness. And I just sensed a deterioration of health. So I looked around at the different health, wellness, and medical professions. My dad's actually a gastroenterologist outside of Washington, D.C., and a professor at GW Medical School. And I thought to myself, medicine is not for me. There's plenty of people who specialize in working with drugs and surgery, but I want to take the natural approach. I looked around at physical therapy, nutrition, personal trainer, chiropractor, acupuncture. I looked around at everything of all the allied healthcare professions, and I selected a chiropractor. A chiropractor is a primary care limited physician, which basically means that we're trained in differential diagnosis, all types of lab and imaging. But the medicine we use is basically everything that I mentioned before. And so we're basically all natural primary care physicians, and we use everything from natural approaches to the body's own medicine to help people get well.
That's awesome. And I think I've noticed that trend too, where it just seems like where the higher up in the business rung you go, you just see people's health deteriorate from the effects of stress and just their lack of ability to maintain themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And having literally come from corporate America, even though I was young and totally unattached, and it was easy for me to stay, in a health and wellness lifestyle, I thought to myself, this is silly. I want to help people just like this learn how to be successful and healthy at the same time, which is really quite attainable.
That's great. Now, one of the things I've noticed that's pretty interesting is you work with a lot of high-level athletes. I've seen pictures of you working with volleyball players down in Miami. I've seen pictures of you taking care of Dwayne Wade. What's unique about your approach that's lent to working with these high-level athletes?
I would say probably, an important place to start is that I'm an athlete myself. And so I can really relate to the no rest concept. And when I say no rest, I don't mean be unreasonable with your body, but when it comes to working with professional athletes, their ability to, quote, stay in the game, it's not a question of having a small injury and saying, okay, you got to stop working out or stop performing for the next 6 weeks. In many cases, unless it's a severe injury, that's not a reality. That's how they make a living. And so my approach is largely also treat and release, which means that I will treat the patient with regards to chiropractic care, any other complementary therapies, soft tissue work, nutrition, yoga, but it's geared really towards not just getting athletes out of pain, but also teaching them how to stay well and perform better.
And I think that's why you made a great guest for the show, because the concept of our show is called Heal Yourself Radio. And
Awesome.
We really want to give people tools and avenues so that, they could stay out of doctors' offices and really pay more attention to doing things that are preventative and keep themselves healthy when they're outside of the doctor's office. So
Great.
You have a reputation as being the yoga doctor. How do you integrate yoga into your patient care?
I would say that it's probably the primary modality that we use. Once I get a patient into my office, they're accepted as a patient, and I use chiropractic and manual therapies to get a person out of pain. The question is not how quickly can I get somebody out of pain, which is fast, but the primary question is, how did they end up in my office in the first place? Unless it is a car accident or an overt sports injury or some unusual incident, generally what you and I see in our offices are preventative injuries and different types of pain. The reality is, for all of our patients, and I'm actually sitting in my car commuting in Miami as we speak, so for all of our patients who spend most of their time sitting in an office chair and then commuting in their car, everything that our lifestyle is based around is sitting and lack of movement. So when people end up in our offices with any amount of spine pain or physical conditions, I find that yoga it's not even just a luxury anymore. It's a reality of teaching people how to stay well. Yoga, it's not only gentle, but it's extremely safe. It helps patients move their joints through ranges of motion, condition muscles, and then you can't ignore the fact that it's probably one of the top natural stress relievers that's available to use on a daily basis. And so when you think about addressing the physical, chemical, and emotional aspects of helping people get well, yoga is a very, very powerful tool that we use in our office to teach patients how to stay well.
And you use this even, like, a lot of people know that yoga is really great for taking care of your spine. A lot of people don't understand how it integrates with a person's strength, how people use it as stress management, and that there's a lot of published research out there, even relating to things outside the musculoskeletal realm. Do you want to touch on that?
Absolutely. There's actually a great book. I think it came out within the last year. I believe it's called The Science of Yoga. It's the best collection of studies that I've seen for a variety of health conditions that have been addressed with yoga. Now, the reality is that yoga's been around for something like 3,000 to 4,000 years, so it's not a question of whether or not it works, for a variety of health conditions, but it's now being used in almost all major medical teaching universities. They do studies on anything from heart disease to Alzheimer's to breaking addictions there's a terrific doctor, Dr. Lauren Fishman, based out of New York, that's done studies on yoga healing rotator cuff injuries, as well as treating osteoporosis and rebuilding bone density.
That's awesome. And for our listeners, if you want to get references for all this information, we'll have it on our website at healyourselfradio.com, and they'll be in the show notes. What's a misconception about yoga that you'd like to dispel today?
A misconception. Oh, sorry about that.
Welcome to Miami.
Exactly. Bienvenido a Miami. I would say there's a couple misconceptions about yoga. The first of which is that it is some strictly oming, meditative, hippie tradition that you need to wear fancy yoga pants and be sitting up in an ashram in Tibet to be able to appreciate the modern aspects. Everyone from NFL teams to doctors like myself are using them in modern practical ways. Another myth that we have to debunk rather is that you have to be flexible to practice yoga.
I
In
hear that one
fact,
all the time.
correct. I mean, it's like I'm sitting here in my car and my hands are on my face. It's silly to think that you have to be some flexible ballerina type to practice yoga. I personally am not a physically flexible person. I'm far stronger than I am flexible. And so when you think about the benefits that I can bring, not just to my daily comfort level, but also to my athletic performance by improving my flexibility and balance, there's something to be said. I tell patients and yoga students that they're going to want to check their ego at the door, because it's a very humbling practice to step onto a mat and say, you know what, I'm really not good at this thing, and I plan on working on it so I can get better at it.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for examining your weaknesses without judgment, and then allowing yourself to develop as a gift to your body.
That is so true. And the example I like to give to people who are skeptical about yoga, or who just say things like, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible enough. I relate it to golf because a lot of people like to play golf even though they're terrible at it. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, so it's like saying, so I'm not going to play golf anymore because you're a bad golfer. Is that how it works? Like, no, you have to practice it. Just like you want to
Yes.
improve flexibility, you have to practice that, and yoga is a great avenue for that.
Absolutely. And then all the people who say, I can't meditate, I can't stop thinking, my mind is too busy for that, that's exactly the person that will benefit the most. And a comparison I like to say with all the people who say they can't meditate is that stress, as we get older, it abounds. And the older we get, the worse the stress gets. Trying to learn how to meditate when you're already stressed out is like trying to learn how to swim when you're already drowning. So it takes time and it takes practice, and that next time you're going through a stressful time in your life, that's when you're able to dip into a regular practice to help cool you off.
Definitely, it's great advice. So let's just say that you had someone that you meet has musculoskeletal pain. What is your advice to them? Should they seek treatment first, or should they jump into a yoga program? What kind of advice would you have for that person?
That's a good question. If it's just a little, the little aches and pains and soreness, kind of super low grade mechanical type stuff, I personally come from a walk it off type personality, maybe like a lot of my patients. There's nothing wrong with Googling gentle yoga, beginner yoga. I do a training with yoga teachers. It's called a Yoga Doc's Guide to Working with Injury. And these are yoga teachers who are trained in working with basic musculoskeletal pain. But I think there's nothing wrong, as long as you're not ending up in an advanced type yoga practice, to go try and stretch and strengthen. If it's something that's been bothering you for a period of time, I would say that the next very important step is to go see a chiropractor like yourself or me down in Aventura. Chiropractors who take a multifactorial approach to helping people, kill their musculoskeletal pain and also learn how to live without it. And that could include, spinal adjustments, physical therapy exercises, changes in nutrition, and of course, yoga.
For sure. So for people that are thinking about getting into yoga, but they don't want to be misled, they don't want to end up in a bad studio, What are some red flags that you usually tell people? These are things to look out for when you're looking at joining a yoga studio or being part of a yoga program.
That's a great question. Something that they can do is, I always say yoga is like food. There's a lot of kinds and some of it's junk. Any studio that has an aggressive, dogmatic approach to doing physical postures, as in when you speak with them or when you feel out your first yoga class, that the teacher does one of two things: either verbally guides you and forces you into postures that hurt, like a physical pain, or they actually use their hands to help pull you into postures that hurt. That's a waving red flag that it's probably not the right style, studio, or teacher for you. Something to differentiate when you take that first class. And also, I like to go by word of mouth, asking friends, family, colleagues, or a doctor like yourself, where's a good, safe, gentle place for them to start up yoga. It's important to understand the difference between pain and discomfort. Pain feels like a fracture or a tearing or a red flag, like you mentioned. Discomfort is using muscles and physical ranges of motion that you haven't worked in a while that are actually exercise.
Definitely. And I think that's something that yoga is also very useful for, is developing that body awareness, because a lot of people, I feel like, are very disconnected
Yeah,
from their bodies, and they don't know and they're unable to interpret what's going on in their bodies because they have that disconnection.
absolutely. It's funny. Do you ever get that patient who has slumped over posture and stenosis and nerve pain and severe degeneration, and they go, I need you to fix this in one visit. It wasn't like this yesterday.
Every day almost.
I'm like, my friend, it took you 40 years to end up here. It's going to take you a little bit of time to get out, and you're going to be doing 90% of the work.
As long as they understand that they're going to be doing the work and they're on board with that, then it usually works out pretty well.
Yeah. Yoga definitely teaches people a little bit more body awareness, so that you don't end up in the doctor's office with acute emergencies or chronic conditions that take a very, very long time to develop.
Absolutely. As far as, we know that yoga is generally pretty safe for most people to take part in.
Yeah.
Are there any contraindications for people? Is there things that are poses that you recommend for people stay away from, or conditions that may interfere with that?
Yeah, anyone that you and I see in our practices, there's literally a whole variety of contraindications, which is why it's important to work with a teacher who's either a licensed yoga therapist — unfortunately, there's only a few actually in the state of Florida — or somebody who may have even taken the training that I do, which teaches about rotator cuff tears, herniated discs, stenosis, osteoporosis. So people that you and I work with, yes, there are a number of contraindications. I would say the big ones these days are forceful forward bending, that I've kind of fallen out of favor with. Why? Because there's a lot of people with lumbar, low back, and neck cervical injuries, and any sort of undue pressure can cause increased disc damage, especially if you already have something pre-existing. So when it comes to forward bending, I'm far more in favor now of bending the knees instead of keeping them perfectly straight.
Okay.
And I've also fallen out of favor with some of the inversion poses that put too much pressure on the neck or cervical spine. A good example would be something like a headstand.
Sure.
When you think about now, I like it and I can do it when I'm careful, but the cervical spine is literally just not a weight-bearing structure.
Right.
So if you're really careful and you have a great teacher and you have really good shoulder stability, it could be okay to practice. But I would say for most people who are trying to dip their toe in the yoga pool, I would avoid anything that puts too much pressure on the neck and cervical spine.
And that's something that I advise all my CrossFit patients as well to look out
Great.
for, is to avoid the dropping of your head onto the ground repeatedly. And we
Oh,
know
Lord.
that that's a pretty big injury that I've seen in my office quite a bit, is when
Wow.
they drop their head on the ground and they're aggravating
Oh, my
some
God.
underlying disc pathology there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, as a former CrossFitter, and I do love CrossFit, there's many different approaches and trends in fitness as we move through the decades. And the ones that make you scratch your head a little bit, that seem like outliers, you have to say to yourself, I see everybody is doing this, but I don't think this is right.
Right.
And
Exactly
that's
right.
that's one of them. Too much pressure on the neck. It's literally just not designed that way. So sometimes in life, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Absolutely. So we're going to learn a little bit more about you now.
Okay.
What's something that you do for your own health that not enough people know about?
Something I do for my own health. I just started surfing again a lot.
Sounds like a rough
Yeah,
life.
I know. Oh, it's so terrible. Oh, poor me. Um, that's actually why I stayed in Florida after chiropractic school. I fell in love with surfing when I went to chiropractic school, Palmer in Daytona Beach, and I had this great little life in Miami, practicing part-time, surfing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then one day I woke up and I said, you know what, I should build a much bigger office, like a palace of natural therapies. And so I just spent the last year doing a gut renovation and putting together my whole team, in which I surfed maybe like 2-3 times in the whole year. And so something that I do for my health, my creativity, my expansion, my physical body, my brain space, is absolutely crucial that I get out physically in nature and the ocean, because with all the other great stuff that I do, from yoga to vegetables to getting enough sleep, surfing lights me on fire, and it really, it brings for me my whole picture of health together.
That's awesome. I think that's the first time anyone's answered a question like that. So kudos to you for
Oh,
that.
well, thank you.
Speaking of diet, what does your diet look like?
Right now, I would say in general, I'm an 80-20. That's typically for most people and models a success formula. 80% of the time, I eat what's called an anti-inflammatory diet. When I say diet, I don't mean fat and calories, carb, no carb. Grain products, sugar, flours, cookies, pretzels, cereals, soy products. Doesn't matter how you slice or dice them, highly inflammatory. Inflammatory chemicals in the body, leading cause, leading cause of all the chronic, degenerative everything that you and I treat and medical doctors treat every day. I follow a mostly anti-inflammatory diet: fruits, vegetables, lean grass-fed protein, and that allows me to wake up every single morning with no stiffness in my body, no bags under my eyes, clear skin, high energy levels, lower body fat percentage. And the other 20% of the time, I probably live off of chicken wings and beer. And
Sounds
maybe
like
some
right up my
pizza.
alley.
Yeah, and maybe some pizza too, because mind you, those things, they don't make me feel good, but I'm not an extremist in any facet of my life. And so if I've strayed a little bit too far off that 80-20, I will clean it up really tight and do hardcore anti-inflammatory diet for like a month at a time. My patients will do it as well. It's our 21-day detox program. But overall, if I want to have a little ice cream or pizza or whatever it is, I'm going to have it. I just don't keep it in the house.
Sounds like my 20%. My 20% usually has pad thai and pizza in there.
Exactly. And it doesn't make us feel good, but if you want it, just go for it.
Absolutely. And I just find that when I have those cheat days, that feeling when I feel terrible afterwards, it just
Oh yeah.
reinforces going back.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. The food hangover.
oh yeah.
Food hangover, not good. But you, as a clean eating CrossFitter, you're so aware now that when you feel sick and bloated and low energy after having one of those meals, you say to yourself, I'm not going to do that again for a little while.
Yeah, I'm
You
good.
don't. Yeah, you're good. You're not going to go, you know what? I'm going to caffeinate myself through this and sleep the day away and ignore all of these inflammatory symptoms.
Yeah, and I think it's important that when um, you're preaching something when you're teaching people to go into that 80/20, that you also live that lifestyle too. And I just try to apply that in every aspect of my practice.
Absolutely. That's great.
If you could give someone a book or resource that would make their life better, what would it be?
Ooh, where do I start? Oh, we could talk about books for an hour. A book that would change their. Can I do two? Let's do
Yeah,
two. Okay. The first one of which is the Wheat Belly Diet. It gives you a very easy to understand, straightforward explanation of how the grains that we eat today have absolutely nothing to do with the grains that people consumed 100 years ago, and how grain and sugar products make people incredibly sick. That's a very low-hanging fruit, easy place to start. They have the Wheat Belly Cookbook as well, so that you can have baked goods and that you're not making yourself crazy crying out for a bagel. The second book I highly recommend that has a DVD as well. It's called Foundation Training. It is written by a chiropractor based out of California. His name is Dr. Eric Goodman, and it was written with I think an athletic trainer, Peter Park. It's a cousin of yoga. It's a way more spine rehab friendly, practical approach to spine rehab. There's 50,000 great back exercises out there. This is the only comprehensive system that I found that when I give it to my patients, they not only get better, but they do it on their own. You know, compliance is a big issue when it comes to having a successful healthcare practice.
for sure.
And Foundation Training, both the book and the DVDs, really teaches patients how to use their back muscles in such a way that they can become emancipated from crisis visits to doctors.
That's great. And I'll definitely put those two up in the show notes, so you'll have links to Amazon if you're interested in
Great.
buying those too.
Great.
Last thing, if you could pick one thing that you could recommend to every person that they would do and that would improve their life and health, what do you think it would be?
Ooh, one thing, honestly, is to let it go. And when I say let it go, to improve their life and health, you're going to want to let go of whatever story you've been telling yourself. Why you can't play a sport, why you have pain from an injury, why you can't lose weight, why you can't make time to do the things that you love and decompress. We all have a certain number of stories. I listen to them every day in my office. Everybody has their stories for why they have their back pain, why they have knee pain from high school, why they don't have the time to take care of themselves because they're taking care of a spouse and kids, and their work is harder than everybody else's work in the whole world. As soon as you literally start letting go of these stories, you'll literally watch health and happiness seep back into your life through any number of these great resources that we talked about on your show today.
That was great advice. It's very yogini of you.
It's true. Once you start to work with enough people and see that the equation for not just getting people out of pain but keeping them well, it's so easy. You know, and explain this to patients. I go, don't tell anybody how easy my job is. Once you really break it down for people and they kind of unravel their stories, you're allowed to have that kind of effusive health that other people have. You know, it's not exclusive to certain populations of people of the yoga peeps.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I had for you, Sandy.
Right.
If people want to get a hold of you or if they want to learn more about you, what are some resources for them to reach you?
There's a couple good ones. If you want to reach out to us on Facebook, our office page is Miami Sports Chiropractic and Yoga Center. I can be reached via email at info@drdoman.com, drdoman.com. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Yogadoc, YOGADOC, Yogadoc.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending some time with us today. We'll definitely look to maybe have you on again later in the future and delve into this yoga thing a little bit more.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Heal Yourself Radio. If you like what you hear, show us some love on iTunes by writing a review or by sharing with your friends. We love interacting with our listeners. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/healyourselfradio. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Jonathan Chung. And you can always come to our website at healyourselfradio.com and interacting with us in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week.